I never expected to find something like this in a damn hardware store. Let me back up. I was 27, in that weird stretch of adulthood where you're too old for house parties but too broke for wine tastings. I just moved to a new neighborhood after a bad breakup, the kind that makes you want to throw out half your furniture and start over. That Saturday, I was at the local hardware store looking for curtain rods and wall anchors. Riveting, I know. The place was mostly empty. Kinda quiet, except for some indie rock playing over the speakers. I was in the aisle with the drill bits when I heard someone ask behind me, "You know which size you need?" I turned around, and yeah, there he was. He had this effortless confidence about him, dressed in paint-stained jeans and a white t-shirt that clung to his arms in a way that made it hard not to stare. Tan skin, short dark hair, a jawline you could cut glass with. And those eyes, hazel, but they caught the light just right. For a second, I didn't respond, just stared like a complete idiot. "You good?" he said, raising an eyebrow and half smiling. Yeah. Just deciding whether I want to guess or Google it," I said, holding up two nearly identical screws. He laughed, low and warm. "Let me guess. You just moved in? Is it that obvious?" He shrugged. "You've got the 'I'm pretending I know how to hang a shelf' look down." I laughed, more embarrassed than I wanted to admit. "That obvious, huh? I work here on weekends," he said, sticking out a hand. "I'm Mateo." I shook it. "Eli. Well, Eli, I've got a shelf installation kit in aisle 6 that'll save you about an hour of frustration and 2 unnecessary holes in your wall." I followed him without thinking. Mostly because I liked the way he said my name. We made small talk as he pointed out what I needed. He didn't rush, even though I was clearly not his only customer. There was something about the way he carried himself. Calm, grounded, like he was used to being the one people leaned on. "You live around here?" he asked casually as I paid at the register. "Just moved into one of those old duplexes on Belmont," I said. "It's still half full of boxes." He smiled. "That's a good street. Quiet. Lots of trees." "Yeah, just me and my plants for now." "No roommate?" I shook my head. "Nope. Just ended a long relationship. I figured it was time for a fresh start." He didn't say anything at first, just nodded slowly, like he understood more than he was letting on. "You need help hanging those shelves," he said finally. "I'm free after 5. I do side work too, if you don't mind me bringing a beer." I hesitated, my heart picking up speed. Was he being friendly, or was this something else? "Yeah," I said, keeping my voice calm. "That'd be great." "Cool," he said, scribbling a number on the back of my receipt. "Text me the address." That evening, I cleaned like I was hosting a damn dinner party. Which was stupid, because this wasn't a date. He was just helping. I lit a candle anyway. Mateo showed up right on time, tool bag in one hand, 6-pack in the other. His shirt was different, but the same style. Fitted, soft-looking, probably worn from years of use. He smelled like sawdust and something warm and clean. "You weren't kidding about the boxes," he said, stepping inside. "Yeah, I'm working on it," I said, trying to sound breezy. "Make yourself at home." He walked in like he'd been there before, cracking open a beer and asking where the shelves were going. I pointed to the hallway wall, and he got to work, measuring, marking, all while casually sipping his drink and chatting with me about the neighborhood, old houses, how he grew up nearby and only recently came back after traveling a few years. I don't know what it was, maybe the rhythm of his voice, or the way he kept looking at me when he thought I wouldn't notice, but I felt a pull. Like we were circling around something neither of us wanted to say out loud. And then it happened. He dropped a screw, knelt to grab it, and when he stood back up, we were closer than before. Not touching, but almost. Close enough that I could smell the soap on his skin, feel the warmth radiating off him. He looked at me, held my gaze. Neither of us moved. "Eli," he said, quietly, and that was it. Just my name. But the way he said it wasn't casual. My chest tightened. I didn't know what to do, what to say, but I didn't look away. "Yeah?" I asked. His eyes dropped to my mouth for half a second, and then he smiled. "Hand me that level?" I handed it to him, but my fingers lingered just a moment longer than they needed to. And that night was just getting started. I should have known then, just from the way our fingers brushed, that things weren't going to stay strictly handyman helping out a neighbor. Mateo didn't say anything else that hinted at what had just happened. He kept working, tapping his level against the pencil marks, using a power drill like it was an extension of his hand. But his focus wasn't perfect. I noticed how his jaw clenched when I moved too close, or how he'd pause just slightly if I leaned against the wall to watch. We finished the shelves in under 20 minutes. Efficient. Clean. He stepped back and nodded like he was inspecting a piece of art. "Solid," he said. "You'll be able to put anything on these, even regrets." I laughed, more out of nerves than amusement. "Guess I have plenty of those." His eyes flicked over to mine. "Don't we all?" We were quiet for a second, both of us still standing there in the narrow hallway, staring at those two freshly mounted shelves, like they were going to give us the answer to something. "You hungry?" I asked, blurting it before I could think too hard. I was going to order pizza or something. He smiled. "Yeah, I could eat." So I did it. Ordered a pizza, even though I wasn't really hungry. We moved to the living room, still surrounded by boxes. I cleared off the coffee table and sat on the edge of the couch while he took the floor, leaning back against the far end, legs stretched out, sipping another beer. We talked more, about everything and nothing. Turns out Mateo had lived in the neighborhood as a kid, moved away for college, and floated around the country doing odd jobs and building renovation stuff before ending up back home. He liked simple things, old motorcycles, 70s rock, woodworking videos on YouTube. It was kind of ridiculous how easy he was to talk to. At one point, I asked him why he came back. He looked at me for a second and then said, "Needed to reset, figure out who I am again." I nodded. That's kind of why I moved too. He didn't ask what happened with my breakup. He didn't need to. There was something in the way he sat there, grounded and quiet, like he knew when to let silence do the work. The pizza came. We ate cross-legged on the floor. At some point, I made us drinks, whiskey and Coke, the only thing I had. He wrinkled his nose at the sweetness, but drank it anyway. I don't know exactly when it happened, but the vibe shifted. It wasn't obvious, just small things. The way our knees brushed and neither of us moved. The way he looked at me when I laughed, just a beat too long. The fact that we were both suddenly sitting closer on the rug than made any logistical sense. "I should probably head out," he said at one point, setting his empty glass down. "You could," I said, "or you could stay a little longer." He turned his head, eyes locking with mine. "You sure?" I nodded. "Yeah." And just like that, we weren't talking anymore. He leaned in first, but I didn't make him do all the work. His lips were warm and slow against mine, his hand finding the side of my face like it was the most natural thing in the world. It wasn't rushed. It wasn't messy. It felt intentional, measured, like he'd been thinking about it as much as I had. We kissed until my knees ached from sitting on the floor, until the room felt too warm and my brain was a fog of adrenaline and disbelief. At one point, he pulled back just slightly, forehead resting against mine. "This okay?" he asked, voice rough. "Yeah," I said, "more than okay," and it was, because even though I just met him that morning, sitting there in a half-unpacked apartment with an empty pizza box and tools still out on the floor, it felt like I'd known him a lot longer. He stayed that night. Didn't even pretend to fall asleep on the couch. I didn't ask him to. I just handed him a spare toothbrush, and he followed me to my room like we'd already done it 100 times before. We didn't rush anything. No frantic undressing or movie scene makeouts. Just two guys finding comfort in the quiet space between bodies, in skin against skin, in the unspoken understanding that something had shifted, and we were both letting it, We fell asleep tangled together, the hum of the city in the background, his breath steady against the back of my neck. When I woke up the next morning, the first thing I felt was his arm draped over my waist. The second was this quiet little thought I couldn't shake. This isn't going to be just a one-time thing. I woke up first, that quiet kind of morning where the sunlight slips through the blinds in stripes and the city noise is just a distant hum. I didn't move. Mateo's arm was still wrapped around me, and his breath was slow and even. It felt weirdly intimate, like we'd been doing this for months, not just one night. I laid there for a while, letting the feeling settle. The warmth of him behind me, the scratch of stubble on my neck, his leg half draped over mine. I should have been anxious, wondering what this meant, whether it was a mistake, if I'd misread everything. But I wasn't. I just felt good. Eventually I shifted, careful not to wake him, and slid out of bed. I threw on a shirt and padded into the kitchen. Made coffee, found 2 clean mugs, and stood staring at the slow drip of the machine like it might tell me what the hell to do next. 10 minutes later, I heard footsteps. Mateo walked in wearing nothing but his jeans, rubbing the sleep out of his eyes. That smells like life," he mumbled, nodding toward the coffee. "Made it strong," I said, handing him a mug. He took it, sipped, and let out a soft groan. "Perfect." I leaned against the counter, trying not to let my eyes linger on his chest too long. He noticed anyway. "You always stare this much in the morning?" he asked, smirking. "Only when there's something worth staring at." He laughed quietly and set the mug down. "So," he said, "last night." "Yeah," I swallowed. "Last night." "You good?" he asked, voice soft now. "I don't want to assume anything." I looked at him for a long moment. "I'm good. More than good." He stepped closer. "I don't usually do this either," I nodded. "Me neither, but I'm glad it happened." He took another sip of coffee. "Yeah, me too." We didn't label it. We didn't need to. But something shifted after that morning. Subtle, steady, like a tide coming in. Mateo started coming over more, sometimes under the pretense of helping me fix stuff in the apartment, which really just meant hanging out, ordering takeout, watching old movies we half paid attention to. Other times he'd just text me, "Want to get a drink?" and we'd end up walking around the neighborhood, talking about things we didn't say to anyone else. He was easy to be around. But more than that, he was safe. He didn't push, didn't ask me to define anything. Just showed up, again and again, until being around him started to feel like the most natural thing in the world. But not everything stayed easy. A few weeks in, I ran into my ex. At a coffee shop of all places. We exchanged stiff hellos, that weird forced politeness that only happens when you've both moved on but still remember every fight in vivid detail. Afterward, I texted Mateo. "Drinks?" He met me at our usual dive bar, still in his work clothes, paint flecked on his forearms. "You good?" he asked the second he saw me. I nodded, then shook my head. "Saw Ben." His jaw tensed slightly. It wasn't a big deal. Just weird. Brought back stuff." Mateo didn't say anything right away. He just ordered us 2 beers and sat beside me, thigh pressed against mine. "Do you want to talk about it?" he asked after a while. "Not really," I admitted. "Then we don't have to." And just like that, the tension eased. He never made me explain what I didn't want to. Never made me feel like I had to justify my feelings. He just made space for them. For me. That night, as we walked back to my place in the cool quiet of the streetlights, I stopped halfway down the block. "I think I'm catching feelings," I said, staring at a crack in the sidewalk. Mateo didn't speak right away. I felt him shift beside me. Then his hand brushed against mine. "Good," he said, "because I've already got them." I looked over at him, and he was just there, like he always was. Solid, real, no games, no second guessing, just Mateo. After that night on the sidewalk, things didn't explode into some dramatic love story. They just deepened. Mateo never rushed me. We didn't start using words like boyfriend, or post selfies, or have big sit-downs about what we were. But we saw each other nearly every day. Sometimes he'd stay over, sometimes I'd crash at his place. Though his apartment was smaller and cluttered with tools, half-finished wood projects, and that old black and white dog-eared poster of the Clash he swore was a collector's item. We developed a rhythm. He'd fix something in my apartment I didn't even know was broken. I'd cook. He was terrible in the kitchen, but he always insisted on doing dishes. One night we were both exhausted. He from a full day doing cabinetry installs, me from a brutal round of client calls, and ended up lying side by side on my living room floor, heads resting on couch cushions, legs stretched out in opposite directions. We didn't speak for a while, just lay there in the dark, letting the quiet fill in the cracks. "You ever think about what this is?" I asked. "Yeah," he said, no hesitation. "And?" He turned his head toward me. "I think I like how it feels." "That's not an answer," I said, trying not to smile. "It's not a question," he shot back. We lay there in silence again, but this time it wasn't heavy. It was full, like both of us were holding onto something neither of us had quite named yet. Eventually he said, "You want a label? Or are we just doing this until it stops feeling right?" I looked over at him. His face was mostly in shadow, but I could see his mouth twitching at the corners. "I don't want it to stop feeling right," I said. He reached over and linked his pinky with mine. "Then it won't." That was how Mateo worked. No grand declarations, no pressure, just quiet assurance. I didn't need fireworks. I just needed him. But not everything stayed easy forever. It was a Friday, early spring, when things hit a weird bump. I'd invited him to a small get-together, just some people from work, a few friends from college. Nothing fancy, just drinks and bad Spotify playlists. Mateo said he'd come after wrapping up a job across town. The party was already in full swing when he texted, "Running late, be there soon." I told myself I wasn't nervous, but I was. Because up until then, it had just been us, our world, our rules. Now I was opening that door and letting other people see, letting them make assumptions, ask questions. He arrived about an hour later, still in work boots, hair messy, eyes tired but sharp as ever. I handed him a beer, and he gave me this small, grounding smile, the kind that used to undo me. But then a friend of mine, Julia, came over, a little drunk, a little nosy. She threw a glance at Mateo and then looked at me. "Sue, this the guy you've been sneaking off with?" Mateo's brow ticked up. I froze. "It's not like that." Julia blinked. "I mean, I didn't mean anything." Mateo smiled politely, but I could tell he'd already pulled back. After that, he stayed quiet, made small talk, said the right things, but when he left, he didn't kiss me goodbye. The next day I texted him, "Hey, you good?" It took hours for him to respond. "Yeah, just thinking." I knew what that meant, so I called him, asked him to come over. When he did, his energy was different, like he'd built up some invisible wall. "I didn't mean to put you on the spot," I said, as soon as the door closed. He rubbed the back of his neck. "It's not that." "Then what?" He was quiet. Then, "I guess I didn't realize how private we've been until last night." "You didn't like it," I said, more a statement than a question. He shrugged. "It wasn't about not liking it. I just wasn't ready." I nodded, trying not to take it personally. "Okay." He sat down on the edge of my couch. "I'm not going anywhere, Eli. I just need to figure out how this looks, outside of us." I sat next to him. "We don't have to rush that part. We can do it at your pace." He looked over at me, something soft in his eyes. "You sure?" I reached out, took his hand. "Yeah, as long as you're still here." He squeezed my hand once. "Always." After that conversation, something between us shifted again, but in a good way. We didn't avoid each other. If anything, we saw each other more. Mateo made a point to check in, even on days we couldn't meet up. You good?" Text. A quick photo of something dumb he saw that reminded him of me. One time it was a busted lawn gnome that looked exactly like my hungover face. He started showing up to more things too, slowly, Not all at once. He came to another get-together a few weeks later, stayed close to me the whole night, even introduced himself to people without me having to prompt him. He never kissed me in public, but he didn't hide the way he looked at me either. That meant more than he probably realized. One afternoon in May, I came home from work to find a note taped to my door. "Your door squeaks. Fixing it. Also, dinner's on me tonight." I walked in to find Mateo kneeling by the hinges with a can of WD-40, wearing gym shorts and one of my old sweatshirts. It hit me all at once, how he just integrated himself into my life in the quietest, most complete way. He looked up and grinned. "You're welcome." I dropped my keys and walked over to him. "I didn't ask you to fix my door." "You don't have to." "I notice things," he said, standing. "I like noticing you." My heart flipped a little in my chest. We didn't go out that night. We ordered Thai and watched some dumb sci-fi movie I couldn't even pretend to follow. Somewhere halfway through, I ended up straddling his lap on the couch, kissing him slow, our drinks forgotten on the table. It was one of those nights where everything felt easy, natural, no walls up. When we finally made it to my bed, it wasn't new anymore, but it still felt like something. His mouth on my neck, his hands gripping my waist like I was something to be held, not just touched. And afterward, when our breathing slowed and the sweat cooled on our skin, he stayed tucked against my chest, his fingers tracing slow shapes along my ribs. "I've never had this," he said so quietly I almost missed it. This comfort, this kind of thing that doesn't feel like it's about proving something." I ran a hand through his hair. "You don't have to prove anything to me." "I know," he whispered. In the weeks that followed, we kept building, piece by piece. He started keeping stuff at my place. A toothbrush, a hoodie, then a second drawer. It wasn't an official move-in or anything, but it felt like gravity, like we were slowly rotating around each other's lives until we just settled there. The first time he called me babe, I was brushing my teeth. He walked past the bathroom and tossed it out like it had always been a thing. "Want coffee, babe?" I spit my toothpaste out. "What did you just call me?" He shrugged. "You heard me." I pointed my toothbrush at him. "Say it again, and I might get used to it." He smirked. "Exactly." Not everything was perfect. We had our moments. I once got weirdly jealous when a guy from his past DM'd him on Instagram. He got irritated when I forgot to tell him I was staying late at work and didn't text, but we worked through it. Every time. Without drama, just realness. I started to wonder if maybe this was it. That maybe Mateo wasn't just a chapter. Maybe he was the whole second book. It was early summer when Mateo finally told me he loved me. And it wasn't some candlelit grand romantic moment with violins and champagne, no. It happened while we were cleaning out the hall closet, surrounded by old coats, tangled extension cords, and a box labeled Xmas stuff, maybe. He was trying to untangle a string of lights, swearing under his breath, and I was watching him with this stupid grin on my face, completely unhelpful. "What?" he asked, not looking up. "Nothing," I said, still grinning. "You've got that look, the one that makes me nervous," he said, eyes narrowing playfully. I leaned against the doorframe. "You know you talk to those lights like they personally wronged you, right?" "They did," he deadpanned. "They're garbage." Then, without pausing, he added, "I love you, by the way." Just like that. Like it was as normal as pointing out a broken light bulb. I blinked. "Wait, what?" He looked up, half smiling. I said I love you. My heart jumped into my throat. I wasn't expecting it. Not then, not like that. But as soon as he said it, I knew I'd been feeling the same thing for a while. I was just too scared to name it. "You're saying that while swearing at Christmas lights?" He laughed. Figured it'd soften the blow. I stepped forward, took the string of lights from his hands, and dropped them back in the box. "I love you too," I said. His smile faded into something softer, quieter. He didn't say anything for a second, just reached out, pulled me in, and kissed me on the forehead. The kind of kiss that says, "I'm here. I'm not going anywhere." After that, things got even more settled. Mateo started spending most nights at my place. I'd come home from work to find him already there, barefoot in my kitchen, cooking rice way too early for dinner just because he liked having something ready for when I walked in. He'd kiss me hello, and I'd pretend not to melt every time. We had routines. traditions, Taco Wednesdays, lazy Sunday coffee runs, that weird thing he did where he always folded his socks in threes, which made no sense to me, but I stopped questioning. But there were new things too, deeper conversations, plans for trips, little talks about maybe someday getting a place together that didn't have my ex's couch or his roommate's leftover bed frame. It was a Wednesday night in late June when he asked me something that caught me off guard. We were lying in bed, bodies still tangled from earlier, my head on his chest, listening to his heartbeat. "Would you ever want to meet my mom?" he asked quietly. I lifted my head. "Yeah, of course." He nodded slowly. "She's complicated. It's not a secret that I like guys, but I've never introduced her to anyone." I didn't say anything. I just slid my hand into his and squeezed. "You don't have to explain," I said. "You can do that on your own time. I'm not going anywhere." He looked over at me, eyes searching mine. "You keep saying that." "Because I mean it." He leaned in and kissed me, slow and deep, and I felt the weight of it, the truth in it, the fear, the relief. "I want this," he whispered against my mouth. "All of it. You. A home, even if we suck at buying furniture together." "Hey," I grinned. "I have great taste. You bought a couch based on how fast it shipped." "Exactly. Smart taste." He laughed, the sound low and warm, and pulled me in tighter. We fell asleep that night with the window open, the city humming softly below, his breath steady and slow beside me. And in that quiet, I let myself believe it. This wasn't temporary. This was mine. This was ours. By late July, we were inseparable. Not in the clingy, can't do anything alone way, just in that comfortable, where you go, I go kind of way. It was subtle, automatic, natural. We'd started using words like ours without realizing it. Our place, our Sunday routine, our bed. It didn't matter that he still technically had his own apartment across town. Mateo was with me more than he wasn't. His socks were in my drawer, his toothbrush in my cup, his jacket hanging by the door. It had already happened. We were living together, unofficially, and neither of us questioned it. Then one night, it got real. We were at a cookout one of my coworkers had invited us to. Just a backyard thing. Cheap beer, burgers, too many folding chairs. I introduced Mateo as my boyfriend for the first time. It slipped out. I didn't even think about it. And he didn't flinch. He just slid his hand into mine, like it had always belonged there. After the party, we walked home under the warm streetlights, slightly buzzed from beer and from being around people who didn't make us second-guess ourselves. Mateo kept looking over at me. "What?" I finally asked. "You called me your boyfriend," he said. "You didn't seem to mind." "I didn't," he said, his voice soft. "I just never thought I'd be that guy, walking down the street holding hands with someone and feeling okay." "You're better than okay," I said. "You're mine." He stopped walking right there on the sidewalk and kissed me. Long, deep. The kind of kiss that makes the city disappear. That night, after we got home, after we peeled off our sweaty clothes and collapsed into bed, Mateo lay on his side, tracing my arm with one finger. "I've been thinking," he said. "That sounds dangerous," he smirked. "I want to move in. Officially." I turned to face him fully, heart thudding. "Yeah? Yeah, I'm already here most nights. Might as well stop pretending it's temporary." I didn't hesitate. "Let's do it." He leaned in, kissed me again, slower this time. "Cool," he whispered. "Now we just have to figure out how to fit all my crap in your tiny-ass closet." I laughed. "You can have a drawer." "Wow," he deadpanned, "generous." The move wasn't perfect. We argued over storage bins and whether or not to keep his battered old coffee table. But even the arguments felt like building something, like placing bricks side by side on a foundation we'd already laid. The first night after he officially moved in, we stood in the doorway of the apartment. Boxes stacked everywhere, pizza on the counter, and a bottle of cheap red wine between us. We were tired, sweaty, a little overwhelmed, but I'd never felt more certain about anything. He caught me staring and grinned. "What now?" I shrugged. "I don't know. We live?" "We live," he echoed, walking over and wrapping his arms around me. "And we love." He kissed me again, slow and sweet, and I knew it then. This wasn't just a story about how we met, about that one time I forgot my phone charger and met the guy who would change my life. This was our beginning. Everything else, the love, the arguments, the Sunday mornings, the quiet moments between words, that was just the rest of the story waiting to be written.